Want to know how to heal and strengthen your core postpartum? Today I'm going to tell you. Hi, I'm Polly. I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist and I have been practicing for over 13 years. I am also the founder of No Kegels University, the postpartum education you need and deserve. So today I want to tell you the ways in which you can heal and strengthen your core postpartum. The first thing you should know is that healing your diastasis is going to look different for every woman. The reason is because your genetics are different. And spoiler alert, if you are not able to close your gap, nothing has gone wrong. Just because you're not able to close that gap all the way doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that you did something that you shouldn't have, and it doesn't mean that you didn't do enough of a certain thing. Each woman's body is different, and there are so many considerations that go into deciding how your body will have its abdominal muscles pull apart and how they decide to return back together. But let me give you a couple tips to encourage some lessening of the gap. But of course, the main goal here is that we strengthen those abdominal muscles because they have been through a major event and they need some TLC. So the first step I would tell you is to not worry about trying to engage those abdominal muscles before you stand up, before you bend over, before you do a core exercise, before you do an ab exercise. Why is this? Because we know, even though everyone tells you something totally different, we know that the core muscles will turn on when they're supposed to turn on. Research tells us that there are certain times in which the core will turn on first. Maybe it'll turn on second, maybe it'll activate third or fourth in the order in which muscles are going to turn on. And so by you trying to engage those muscles first, before a movement, before an activity, before an exercise, you are unfortunately and unknowingly getting in the way of your muscles doing what they're supposed to do. No offense, but your neuromuscular system knows what to do. It knows when to tell those muscles to turn on and to turn off, and you don't need to help them. So I know that that can be very disheartening and confusing because everyone is saying engage that core first and then do whatever activity or exercise. But what I'd like to offer you instead is something to swap it out with. I'm sure you know that when you start to try to do a new habit, if you can anchor it to something, or if you're trying to get rid of an old habit, that you swap it out for something, here is what is going to be your swap. Rather than engaging those muscles, because many of you are trained, or you have trained yourself that you have to engage those muscles before you ask them to turn on, I want you to blow instead. So before you do a rep, and then do your rep. Before you bend over to pick up the laundry, and then do a rep. The reason that this works is because it's almost like a signal to that neuromuscular system that knows exactly what it should be doing. It's a signal to that system to tell it, hey, are you ready? On your marks, get set, now show up. This is such an important piece as you're trying to strengthen your muscles in this postpartum time period. And if you don't believe me, try an activity, try an exercise with the blow, and then try an activity or an exercise without the blow. Notice that your core will turn on. Notice that that activity or exercise will become so much easier. The next piece that I want you to be aware of as you're trying to heal and strengthen your core postpartum is that you can make your diastasis worse. In this postpartum time period, which I should outline this, the postpartum time period I'm referencing is around a year after you've given birth. Now, I want to add this piece as well. When you are asking yourself, well, am I postpartum? Am I not postpartum? Generally, my rule of thumb is you are postpartum until you feel like you did before you had kids. So does that mean that your postpartum time frame could last 20 years? Possibly. But I'm here to help you with that so that postpartum time period can be as minimal as possible, but of course allow appropriate time for healing and recovering after this major event, this beautiful major event, should I say. But as this pertains to making your diastasis worse, this postpartum time period that I'm referencing is about a year after having your child. And I like to tell you this because I think this is a consideration that so many people miss. I think OBs miss this because at 6 weeks, they're like, yes, go ahead, do whatever you need to. And then there's fitness influencers that are back working out at a very high, intense rate at 8 weeks postpartum. But here's the thing, your hormones can take up to, and I think sometimes even longer, which is why I said a year. I want to make sure that we're being conservative here, but we still have those hormones in our system up to 9 months, maybe longer, that make our ligaments loosey-goosey, which in turn can influence how our abdominal muscles are affected, meaning that our diastasis can become worse. And the story I want to share with you is my story. I had my first child via C-section and I went back to work at 6 weeks. And depending on your job or what your requirements are, I still had to demonstrate exercises for my patients at the time. And before I went back to work, I checked my diastasis to see what it was. And it was minimal, if anything at all. It was very superficial. And then I went back to work and I started showing my patients exercises because I wanted them to get better. I was just doing my job, right? And a month after I returned back to work, I wanted to check my diastasis again. And I realized that my diastasis was now 2 fingers wide. And I was devastated. And I thought, I'm doing all the right things. I wasn't. I was doing exercises that some of my patients who are athletes were doing to show them how to change it, how to improve it, how to incorporate a pelvic floor component into that particular exercise. I was not doing all the right things. I was asking more of my body than what I was ready to do because I still had those hormones that make everything loosey-goosey, and so I created a larger diastasis. But I got to work. And I used all the things that I'm going to share with you today, plus more things that I'll discuss in other videos. So the next step is that I want you to work on your breathing. I like to call it balloon breathing because the amount of cueing or the type of cueing that I give for this seems to be the best where I can help you elicit the response that we're after. So what I mean by balloon breathing is really diaphragmatic breathing. It's the same thing, except we're just calling into play the fact that our abdominal muscles should blow up with our inhale. And as a result, with everything moving downward, our guts, then that pelvic floor is going to drop as well. So when you look at diaphragmatic breathing, they'll say, okay, like breathe with your belly and make sure you're breathing with your diaphragm. And that's all the cueing that they're giving you, which is fine. However, I want to ensure that your abdominal muscles are getting the appropriate tension and pressure that they need in order to recover. And I say this because there is research to back up this type of breathing to have your gap lessen. And not only have I seen it with myself, I have seen it with my patients for a very long time, but the research also backs this up as well. So not only do I have a guided training on this, I will put the link in the show notes, but very briefly, I'll tell you, lay on your back. I want you to think that you have a balloon inside your belly. As you inhale, I want you to imagine that balloon being hooked up to a helium tank. As soon as you start that inhale, that balloon is going to start filling up with helium. As that happens, you're going to feel that balloon push in the front of your belly, into the sides of your belly and your rib cage. You should feel it push into the back of the back of your rib cage. And then of course the bottom of that balloon has to go somewhere too. Well, that bottom of the balloon is going to push gently into that pelvic floor and you're going to feel that pelvic floor drop. Now, this is ensuring that your pressure system is working at its most basic level. And I'll tell you this, during pregnancy, our pressure system can become disrupted if we aren't doing the proper things. Now, the great thing about disruptions, we can get back on track. So we can get your pressure system back on track too. And this is why balloon breathing is so important, and it's one of the many things that can help you heal and strengthen your core postpartum. So I would recommend getting really good at this, and my tip is lay on your belly. I know it feels very backwards to do, but as you're doing that, it's a really great cue to allow that belly to blow up and to have that full expansion that it needs to ensure that that pressure system is doing exactly what it should do. Now, I'll give you a little tip here as well. This pressure system is one of those things that doesn't get talked about very much, but in fact, getting your pressure system intact is the second phase of the No Kegels University method. The same method that I use in my clinic with my patients and with my coaching clients, and the same thing that I'm putting together in my personal trainer certification, and the same thing that is present in all of my programs that live inside No Kegels University. Why is this important? Because this is a natural and physiological process that happens inside of our body. And if it gets disrupted during pregnancy and can affect our diastasis and can affect how our pelvic floor functions and can affect how efficient we move or how our body even moves. And to me, that speaks volumes that we have to get this pressure system intact and working well for you. And again, research backs it up as well. And the last tip I'm going to give you to help you heal and strengthen your core postpartum is to do this. Start crawling. I know that sounds so silly, but if you think back to your niece or nephew, if this is your first baby that you've had, or if you think back to some of your other kiddos, once they start crawling, it opens up a world of new types of movements. And why is that? It's because our core, or their core, is given the opportunity to start working in response to our arms moving and our legs moving. We know, because of research and how they've studied when certain muscles turn on, that when our arms are moving and when our legs are moving, our core and abdominal muscles are turning on. And this is so evident in the little one who is learning to crawl. Because right after they start crawling, they start reaching a lot more motor milestones. Why? Because their core is finally been given the input that it needs to start getting stronger. The other reason here has a lot to do with our nervous system or our neuromuscular system, which I already referenced before. And I don't want to get too sciencey with you, but there is a lot of frameworks that are built into our spine and our brain and our nervous system and how it functions when we are crawling, when we have opposite arm, opposite leg moving at the same time. So going back to crawling, it's such a foundational and basic movement that will give you loads of improvements. And you can start this as soon as you feel comfortable. And again, you're not tightening anything, you're not trying to engage any muscle group, you're not trying to breathe a particular way, you're just crawling, working on opposite arm, opposite leg, moving forward at the same time. And then the next opposite arm, opposite leg, moving forward at the same time. With all this being said, if you are interested in getting some help with your diastasis, then I would encourage you to check out Diastasis Recti 101. It's the Diastasis Recti program inside No Kegels University. And this particular program gives you the opportunity to create a program and a plan that's specific to you and your body and where you're at in your postpartum phase. This program is also backed and supported by all of the research that we have about diastasis. This is proven not only in the research, but it's the same things that I have been using successfully with my patients for the past 13 years. And this program also shares with you one of the formulas that I use to create a lot of the core and abdominal exercises that I use myself and that I used in my postpartum time frame. And the And it helps me create some of the exercises for my patients, my coaching clients, and some of my other programs and offerings inside No Kegels University. I also would invite you to join No Kegels University Sorority. It's a free group where there is a monthly training, pelvic floor and core exercises, and challenges, and opportunities to ask questions, and it's free to you. And if you have no idea where to start, then schedule a Your Pelvic Floor or Core's Next Step call with me, or fill out the Your Pelvic Floor or Core's Next Step form, and you'll find that in the description box below. And with that, remember, you're an heiress and a queen and everything in between. See you in the next one.